expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, board, staff, or underwriters.
Good day. This is Archie Jennings with the Disability Radio Show, sponsored by Disability Rights of the Virgin Islands. We are here today in order to address the American with Disabilities Act from a very critical, knowledgeable person who's a colleague and affiliate with Disability Rights Center of the Virgin Islands, which is located both on St. Thomas and St. Croix on Center Island. And you can reach at 772-1200 or through our website, drcvi.org, or by email, info@drcvi.org. Good morning, Lawanda. How are you doing?
Good morning, Archie. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good. And you're a great colleague, and I'm glad we are able to capture you and your information. And why don't you let the audience know first who you are and then who you work with?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Lawanda Cook. I'm a senior extension associate with Cornell University's Yang Tan Institute on Employment and Disability. And that's a unique institute within the Labor Relations School on the Cornell campus in Ithaca, New York. My main functions there are as a content specialist with the Northeast ADA Center. And so I have to know a lot about the ADA to do teaching and training on that topic. But my main task within the Northeast ADA Center is to coordinate a national capacity building project that we call the ADA Trainer Leadership Network, or TLN. So that's actually what I'm going to focus on in my comments today. But to give you a little bit of a background before I share that, before I came to Cornell in 2010, I worked for a bunch of years as a counselor and a supervisor within the state vocational rehabilitation program. And the project I'm going to tell you about, the TLN, has a lot of people from the vocational rehab program involved in it. So it might be especially interesting, Archie, to people, your listeners who are directly involved in disability services, and in particular, folks in the VR system.
Which state were you located in?
I was in Connecticut for about 15 years doing that work.
And that was frontline client-to-client work?
Yep, I worked as a counselor, and then I became a supervisor, and then I actually was like a lead supervisor. Every other supervisor had been there less than 2 years, and I was the lead supervisor for a group of, I think it was 8 of us at the time. So I had 12 counselors in 5 locations, and I learned a lot and taught a lot, and rehab is still kind of near and dear to my heart. It's a great field for folks who are thinking about, ways to really make a difference. It's something I genuinely love. And I love that we can still do a lot of work, through this project with VR counselors and other disability professionals.
Well, I note you have a PhD. Did you, in what area did you achieve such degree?
Believe it or not, my PhD is actually in applied health sciences with a focus on leisure behavior and disability. So my research was on the role of leisure in the work-life balance of people with disability. I couldn't leave work out of it, Work and leisure are actually very connected. So one of the most interesting and slightly disappointing things I learned when I went back to school was that you really can't talk about leisure without understanding work, because of the way leisure has been used historically to keep workers kind of working really hard for a good chunk of time and then sort of having that little break a few times a year. So can't get into all the system stuff that goes with that, but it was really interesting. And it really was working with people as a rehab counselor and supervisor that actually led me to go back to school. I had a consumer who we helped her to get a job. She liked her job. It wasn't all she wanted, but it really did fit her life, and she was pretty satisfied with the job. But she really was having trouble making friends. So we helped her get a job, but her whole life didn't look like she wanted it to. And it made it really hard for her to let go of our program and our system. And so it really led me to go back to school and say, how do we help people get full lives, not just employment?
And leisure industry has grown since those days, hasn't it? It's like,
Yes. And adaptive leisure and those kinds of things have, become more common. Inclusive fitness at YMCAs and things like that are much more prevalent. In fact, like I said, I work primarily for the Northeast ADA Center, but YTI, the Yankton Institute, has a bunch of different grant-funded projects. And several years ago, I did an inclusive fitness and wellness toolkit through one of my projects, and I've done some other topics too. So, yeah.
well, for the Virgin Islands, inclusive tourism would be a great topic to really expand upon.
Yeah, so we should think about maybe doing something in the future specifically on that topic, and maybe with the VI in Puerto Rico, which we also serve through the Northeast ADA Center. Yeah.
And since we have a lot of people coming off the cruise ships, and that was one of the
Mhm.
first legal challenges was to make the cruise ships accessible back in the early
Yes, I remember
2000s.
you speaking about that, and I think, I'm not on the TA line like a lot of our TA folks have a little bit more knowledge of those specific legal requirements. The work I did was more around like disability identity and the role of leisure opportunities in that, and also social inclusion at work and among work colleagues.
Oh, great. Well, explain one thing to the
Mhm.
listening audience. Where does the ADA and that Northeast ADA fit into Cornell? Isn't it have to do with labor relations
Right. So
school?
we are housed within the Labor Relations School. We are, like I said, we're one of many grant-funded projects within the Yankton Institute. So like all of our projects in the Yankton Institute, the Northeast ADA is a grant-funded project. We have been fortunate to have the grant for over 30 years. It is something that we have to reapply for every 5 years, and we could at any time have, competition. We have to go through the full application process each cycle, not knowing for sure if we'll get it, but we've been very fortunate to have it. And it is part of labor relations, which is why we focus so much on employment, even though the ADA covers other topics like leisure and other parts of community inclusion. We focus a lot of on employment because of where we're housed at Cornell.
And before you get into the TLN,
Hmm.
uh, explain some of the other aspects of being involved with the national ADA network.
Yes, so the Northeast ADA Center is one of 10 ADA centers across the country. So they're broken up by federal regions, and our region is Region 2. So we serve New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we do all kinds of training and technical assistance, which, I know, Archie, you're directly involved in some of that. And we do research related to the ADA. So these 10 centers make up what's called the ADA National Network, but we all have a obligation. Our reason for existing is to provide training, assistance in helping people understand how the ADA might apply in particular situations. And that's called technical assistance or TA. And then, as I say, we do research related to the ADA. But the whole point of that is these centers are actually mandated within the ADA as a resource to help people understand understand the law. Excuse me.
And quite frankly, you have a toll-free number that
We do. Yeah.
individuals could call and get more information. You want to give at least that aspect of it information
Sure.
to the public
Yep.
now?
It's our toll-free number is 1-800-949-4232. And if you call, somebody will answer that call and talk through whatever your ADA related issue or question is. We don't provide legal advice, but we understand the law. We try to stay on top of, the latest interpretation of the ADA, and we can provide general guidance on that and also direct people to other resources that might be helpful given their particular question or concern.
And with the TA, also given a disclaimer, you don't do any enforcement of the ADA, but you
No,
can.
we're a purely educational resource, right? So I like to tell people we're not the ADA police, right? People can
Yes.
freely call us. They can call us and they can call us and it's a confidential call, meaning we're not sharing that with any other entity. We're not talking to the Department of Justice or Department of, what am I trying to think of?
Department,
EOC or EOC, or the
right.
employment or Department of Justice. So our only goal is to help people understand the law and how it may apply in different situations that they're in, and also to help people think through how can they then implement the law in workplaces and communities.
I always say so they can make an informed decision about their facts and circumstances.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't mandate, right? Because we don't have that legal authority, but we can give them information so they can make a choice about coming in line, hopefully, with the law if they're not currently. Yeah.
And you want to go into your TLN program?
Sure. Yes, happy to. So we've talked a little bit about, the different kinds of things that the Northeast ADA Center is involved in. And so I thought today I would focus on this ADA Trainer Leadership Network, or TLN program. This program is something we actually started in 2007, which was a few years before I came to Cornell. It is now a project where 9 out of those 10 federal regions I mentioned, 9 out of the 10 regions are now involved in this project. And the reason we got started with it is that even though the ADA was passed 35 years ago, right, passed in July 1990, there's still a real need for training and for people to have help in understanding how to implement the law, how to interpret the law. One of the things I want to be really clear about for folks who may be less familiar with the ADA is that it's not a place. The ADA is not a physical location. It's also not a source of funding. It is a civil rights law, right? So our role is to help people understand that law and be able to implement it. And with this particular project, with the TLN, our goal is to help make sure it's implemented at local communities, within local communities, because I mentioned that we serve New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, right? That's a lot of geography. That's a large area to cover. And the only practical way to do that is to teach other people in local communities about the ADA so they can teach their neighbors and employers in the community, businesses, to understand the ADA and implement it locally. So that's kind of what the TLM was created to help do. And the folks that are in the program, I mentioned that we have disability professionals like VR counselors. It is a network of disability professionals, some self-advocates, and others who have some knowledge of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We've been saying the ADA, but we want to make sure people know that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so folks who have some knowledge about that and some connection to disability issues, who are also willing to share information with groups or one-on-one. And this is important because the TLN is not ADA training. We don't teach people the ADA when we help them become members of our TLN. We teach them how to use a curriculum that we developed to do trainings about the ADA, to teach people in their communities about the law. So when they're learning from us in our workshop that we do to have them come into the TLN as members, we're not explaining all the details of ADA. We're teaching them how to use this curriculum to help other people know about the ADA. So having some prior knowledge of the ADA is really useful. And then also, as I say, being willing to share information, because the whole idea is that it's building capacity locally for folks to understand their rights and responsibilities under the law. Now, within this curriculum, we actually have 57 modules, and they cover like 7 broad topic areas. We cover ADA overview, which talks about the ADA and also the ADA Amendments Act. We have some disability awareness modules that cover things like etiquette, talking with folks with disabilities and also understanding different types of disabilities. We cover we have modules, I should say, that cover Title I of the ADA, and that's your employment-related modules, things that talk about employment provisions, we call them, under the ADA. Title II of the ADA is another set of modules, and that covers public services like state and local government services, not just services, but also their physical facilities as well. And then Title III of the ADA is another topic area, and that's public accommodations, which under the ADA refers to businesses or what they call places of commerce. Other areas that are covered in the curriculum are customer service, things like service animals being allowed anywhere humans are allowed, right, in different facilities, and then also accessible technology. And of course, there's going to be some changes to accessible technology under Title II in 2026. We know that there are some new regulations around that, and we'll be getting some new content in our curriculum about those changes. So that's kind of a very broad overview. And what happens is that when people become members of the TLN, they go through a workshop that we call the Train the Trainer workshop. Once they've done that, they then have access to this curriculum. They have access to 57 modules covering these 7 broad topic areas. And they would select what modules they'll use depending on the kinds of audience they're talking to and what those participants, why they were asked to come and do the training. Why did that community group want them to do a training? Why did that business ask for a training? So they're trying to figure out how do they answer the questions or concerns of their audience, and they select modules that will help them do that. They select content from the curriculum that will help them do that. So our next Train the Trainer workshop, which we only offer once a year online, is scheduled for October 2025. And I should say also, Archie, it is a free training. We just ask that people actually use the curriculum to help other people understand their rights under the ADA and implement the law locally.
Typically, how long does the training last?
Okay, so the online training, we've been working hard to design it and kind of tweak it. We've offered it for several years since before COVID. What we have done is made it a month-long commitment, but it's like 4 Fridays or 4 days out of the month. They're doing live sessions, and each live session is 2 hours each. So there's 8 hours of live training spread out over 4 different days. And there's additional training that each training participant does on their own, asynchronous. And there's 3 short sessions that they do asynchronously. And part of that is just to make sure that they're understanding like key ideas. We're doing things like, as I said, we're not really teaching the ADA, but we're teaching a little bit about how to handle challenging questions or maybe difficult questions. We're teaching about resources they can direct their participants to when they're doing a training if a question comes up and they don't know how to respond. We're also teaching them things like, what you and I try to emphasize, Archie, that we're not providing legal advice, right? So being able to help people understand that we're not the ADA police and we're not providing legal advice, but what their role really is as an educator.
And actually, for many times, mediator. Could you basically training people to how to be change agents?
We are teaching people to be change agents, and I could tell you a little bit about that. I have a couple stories I could share with you that we really want them to get involved in their communities first as a trainer to be like a resource to teach, right? But then as they develop relationships and become trusted resources around ADA information, our hope is that they get involved in other ways in the community. And so one of the things that we did this year to kind of understand how well the program is working is we did a research project where we used a process called ripple effect mapping. And with ripple effect mapping, or REM, it's a kind of a storytelling process that's used where people use active listening, and then we do like a visual mapping of the stories that are told, and we look for all of the ways that whatever somebody did, in this case, whatever training they did for a group, how did that then sort of ripple out? What were the other effects that came from just learning about the ADA? So I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them I knew about before this year's research project. One of them I was thinking about the VI in particular, the USVI, and years ago when we were there and we did a TLN Train the Trainer workshop, we had someone that I followed up with, a few months later, and I said, "What have you been doing with the training?" She said, "Oh, nothing really. I just did a training for my coworkers." I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about that." Well, I found out she did training for her coworkers that led the company to realize that they needed to create a policy for requesting workplace accommodations. She thought it was no big deal because she said, just my coworkers. I said, but your whole organization didn't have a policy that they're required to have, which meant nobody who needed accommodation knew how to get that or access those where you work. That's a pretty big impact, right? And it came from her knowing more about the ADA and being able to use the curriculum to teach her coworkers about it. But I had a couple other quick stories for you I wanted to share. One involved a rehab counselor who did a training, and then she kind of built up trust with some different people in the community who were part of the training. And a county ADA coordinator asked her if they could do something more sustainable, something they could keep doing. From that, and this actually happened again, this particular thing started during COVID, but from that invitation to do something more sustainable, they created a job fair called the Diverse Abilities Job Fair in 2021. That job fair now happens in 2 different counties. It's an annual event with more than 350 job seekers that come every year. That's up from 175 in 2021. There are over 60 businesses represented, which is up from the original 19 businesses that attended before. And over 1,000 people in just one of the 2 counties have had a chance to be interviewed one-on-one for employment. And this all started from just using the curriculum to teach about the ADA, teach a community group about the ADA, and somebody heard it and said, we should do more that's more sustainable. So that's a kind of a cool impact from that. We
Yeah.
even had somebody, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say even COVID-19 created a flood of questions because, of course, reasonable accommodations being one of the remedies
Yes.
for asking,
Yes.
and tons of people asking about remote work became an issue under COVID-19.
Yeah, that's another project actually that the ADA Center is doing that I'm involved in is we're doing a research project on flexible work options and how that's all changed since COVID, and in particular, the use of flex options for folks with disabilities. And we're just looking at some of that data. I'm actually still collecting some data, so I can't say too much about the findings just yet, but that definitely changed the landscape a lot. And in fact, one of our TLN members had talked about something she got pulled into during COVID. She's also a vocational counselor, but that wasn't the primary role that she played. She did some training within the school systems around the ADA, but as she got to be well known as a good resource for ADA information, somebody pulled her into a committee within her city that was looking to figure out how to help more people take advantage of outdoor dining during COVID. How to get folks who didn't want to be inside restaurants or couldn't be obviously inside of restaurants to go to the sidewalk dining that they set up. And so in that process, she was able to not only help them physically set up spaces so older folks and people with disabilities were more likely to come out and, be patrons, but she was also able to talk to the restaurant owners and the restaurant workers about rights and responsibilities under the ADA, which was really cool. So it went from, can you come to a couple meetings? We just want to think through, having community members be able to access these dining resources during COVID, to educating employers and folks who were in employment, who were doing jobs, but who had disabilities and needed accommodation and didn't even know, about those rights or about different resources. So it's a really cool project. It's pretty time intensive for the ADA Center staff that are involved in it, which is myself and Joe Zeski, my colleague Joe. It is a pretty time-intensive project, and because it is a national project now, and Northeast ADA oversees it as a national project, so we don't just do the work ourselves for our region, but we also support the other 8 regions that are involved in this. So we get together material for them. We help them run their workshops. We do professional development sessions.
Lawanda, you want to give some more? We're getting close to our time. You want to give some more contact information for the Northeast
Sure.
ADA?
Yeah. So again, I do want to emphasize, Archie, that since you're our local affiliate, you're also able to share this at any time with people. We gave the phone number, which is 1-800-949-4232. And you can also contact us at Northeast ADA at Cornell Northeast ADA at Cornell.edu.
Yes, and then this show is sponsored by Disability Rights Center of the Virgin Islands. You can contact again at 340-772-1200. Offices are in St. Thomas, located Havenside, St. Croix on Centerline Road. And again, take advantage of the information. Both business owners are still, we never even talked about business toolkits, but there's a lot more information that would help individuals, be it employees and employers. And you can also go for reasonable accommodations, which we miss, to a website called askjan, ask.jan.com. And that can also give you a lot of resource and information on our website and the Northeast ADA website. So thank you, Lawanda. Great hearing from you. We might have to do this again in another few months, but take care. Take care, listening audience.
Thank you all. Be well.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.